Hello and welcome to our discussion today on the critical need of ensuring that our healthcare devices are vaccinated against cyber threats. Now, more than ever, we are seeing the surge of digital equipment that is enabling medical professionals and technologists to impart more than just primary healthcare. And these devices are helping the medical community to do much more than there was ever possible in history. Now, this is fantastic and essential, whether it is remote surgery or pacemakers or equipment that helps us look deeper into the nervous system. These digital devices are shaping the landscape of healthcare. A Gartner survey last year in Jan 2020 found that 86% of responding healthcare delivery organizations reported an IoT solution in place. Now, there are estimates that more than 250 million medical devices were introduced in the global market in 2020, and an additional 500 million are expected to enter the market in 2025. This comes with concerns that need to be addressed proactively. Nearly everything connected to the internet opens up a threat vector that can, and in all probability, will be exploited. These risks can be clinical risks, affecting a patient's wellness. It could be an organizational risk, impacting the stability of your business. It could be a financial risk, causing a direct monetary impact, and even a regulatory risk, right? Exposing data and performing actions that may be considered straight out illegal. While this interconnectedness is a blessing, it needs safeguards to ensure that these devices are performing the tasks that they are entrusted to do and only required to do. And to understand how organizations can develop a holistic and comprehensive approach towards securing healthcare organizations and safeguarding connected healthcare devices, we have with us Huzefa Motiwala. Huzefa is the Director for Systems Engineering for India and SAARC markets at Palo Alto Networks. Huzefa, thanks for plugging in today.
Thanks, Ashwin. Pleasure to be here.
Now, what are the key trends that you are noticing in cybersecurity over last year and this year, and the trends that you expect to continue over the years to come?
Yeah, a good question to kickstart this discussion, right? And I would say not just pertaining to healthcare and this industry particularly to be centered around, but any industry, right? Everything that we touched upon was essentially a tech company, right? At the heart of it, it's a tech company being run using technology and making sure in terms of this era that digitally it is touching each and every consumer, healthcare included. What happened in the last 1.5 years was, this acceleration towards digitization or technology adoption just got on a supersonic speed, right? And thanks to the pandemic. So what happened was that data center, which was just the initial perimeter or confined to run all those digital initiatives, is no longer the case. And suddenly, and not suddenly, I would say, by virtue of being forced to kind of go remote, work from home, whether from an employee perspective or their customers perspective, including partners, we were forced to kind of move into this work from home culture, and then accelerating the digital transformation on the back of three things, I would say, right? In terms of either leveraging the entire expanse of enabled and connected networks, right, across various parameters and across various devices. Second, the customer was ready to tap into the cloud agility and cloud-like ergonomics which was there to be tapped, right? So the economies of scale of the cloud, the agility part of it, which was there, it was happening, but just got accelerated, and not just restricting to one cloud, but in a multi-cloud hybrid cloud fashion. And the third thing was AI/ML, right? How do you leverage that capability out there for faster decision making? So all of these for our customers, and specifically healthcare, it was all about how do we provide that enhanced and safer lifestyle out to that consumer, whether in terms of digital or in terms of their health.
And of these, what were the opportunities and challenges unique to healthcare? Of course, there was multi-cloud, there was AI/ML, and this wholesale embracing of these technologies, which we had never seen. We had seen that in pockets, right? We never saw this across the planet. Now, but within the healthcare sector, what were the unique or the specific challenges and opportunities that came about?
Yeah, so healthcare in that way is a bit unique in the sense the amount of transformation which led here, both in terms of the digital transformation as well as in terms of the Industry 4.0 transformation, which is the augmentation of these IoTs and OTs on the device, right? So it was a very precarious or very unique situation from a healthcare perspective. Now, if I add to this couple of things, or rather three things. One, because it was now all pervasive from a healthcare perspective and IoT coming in, we were not restricted to one device or one center. The amount of attack surfaces which opened up was very, very high, right? So almost 3x increase in the attack surface. Followed that, and by any parameter you look at it, the amount of attacks specifically which happened on healthcare devices were very, very high, right? So if I have to bucket, one is in terms of the challenge associated with this digital transformation of, as I said, adopting cloud, work from home, the attack surface increasing, the amount of the types of attacks varying, and all advanced attacks. It's no longer relegated to simplified one bunch of guy, doing some innocuous looking thing. They were also using a very, very high level of sophisticated attack tools, right? So that's one aspect of it. On the other hand, specifically around the healthcare, and as you said, right, the amount of plethora of devices being added, there specifically we saw two or three different type of issues or challenges in a healthcare perspective. One is the sheer amount of medical IoT equipments being added, and the challenge around having a visibility onto that and securing it. Correct. So that's number one. And these had straight impact on the bottom line of from a healthcare perspective, not to mention the direct impact on the patient health and safety. The second piece, I think, which kind of added in to make matters worse, was a lot of these IoMT device or Internet of Medical Things, right? IoMT device could not be trusted out of the box, because these devices pose a huge risk to the hospital and the patient, as they are often shipped with a lot of vulnerabilities, a lot of unsupported operating systems, which are very, very difficult to patch, right? Inherently, these devices lack that level of sophistication or patching. You can't install anything, you can't do anything much over there. So almost 87% of the systems, you'll be surprised, imaging systems for that matter, are powered by end of life OS, right? Which are very, very concerning figure if you look at it, right? And if you add that statistics with the statistic that nearly 44% of health data was compromised in the last 6-7 years, it's the highest among all sector, right? So that was another one. And finally, I think if I have to just round off this specific challenge here, is these IoMT devices are not only hard to secure, but they're also very diverse, right? You could have in a hospital, you could go from an IoT enabled printer to a camera device to infusion pumps to scans to imaging, right? It's a very, very wide spectrum. And not easily managed by IT, right? You can't have agents installed. Traditional security approaches struggle here.
I mean, that's not a rosy picture at all when you're talking about end-of-life OSs working on active equipment, which are, life-saving in many ways. So that pretty much sums up what the security landscape is looking like in healthcare. How are you at Palo Alto Networks addressing this, Huzefa?
Yeah, so before I get into what we bring to the table, I think we should also take a step back and look at what is happening right now. How are people trying to grapple with this and the current approaches, and where they are faltering, right? So the current approach is to kind of have a very signature-based identification approach, number one, which means to try and identify these devices, this massive proliferation of new devices and variants. It's humanly, and it's not absolutely possible to try and write a very, very manual signature-based, hey, I'm going to launch this particular device. Yeah. Here's the signature to identify those, right? And then follow that. It is just, I mean, you just mentioned the statistics, right? In expected 500 million devices to be added in 2025, right? So it's very difficult, and there's no way in identifying this on a very traditional signature-based approach, number one. Right. Number two, even if you provide visibility by doing that, right, that the story doesn't end there, because after visibility, what else? You lack the existing solution, lack the native built-in policy enforcement capabilities, which means I've discovered this sort of device. And in order to reinforce that for this set of device, here are the default policies that you should be going and using those. So that kind of is where the ball is also dropping as we speak. And lastly, as I said, you can't look at this in silos and saying, I'm going to have a very different policy approach for this set of devices to be managed by a different set of people. It has to be under that whole entire cybersecurity program, risk management umbrella of an organization.
It has to be a holistic approach.
It has to be a holistic approach and cannot be a challenge and frequent. So this is the challenge as we speak. From Palo Alto perspective, we took a step back. We said, let's work with some of these international standards providers, right? The NIST or the Department of Health and Human, or plenty of other global standard organization to shape what we feel is a very 5-step workflow for all to secure all kind of IoT and IoT devices, particularly in healthcare, right? And the first step towards that is the identification of that device, right? And this, as I said, it cannot be a manual signature-based event. It has to be completely automated AI/ML based approach. You have to just scan the network, figure out based on the traffic being exchanged by these devices, figure out, hey, is this a printer or an infusion pump or a camera, right? Even without manually having to tell that what adding the signature. So that's extremely critical in figuring out what that device is, what their activity is, what their attribute is, what it should be doing and what it should not be doing. Correct? That's the first step. And once you do that, the second step is for each and every device is the level of risk that device brings, right? And what kind of risk exposure or what kind of access control that should be there for that device, it starts varying. So assessing that current level of risk and creating that baseline is extremely important. For example, if it's a camera, it only has to be a one-way stream, right? The moment you're having a second-way stream, instruction going to that means somebody is trying to sabotage this, right? So that behavior based on that device, you start accessing and then you baseline that risk. Or the third thing then comes, which is extremely important both from a cybersecurity team perspective as well as the clinical healthcare perspective, is policy recommendation. What should be the level of protection or what kind of policy should be going for those kind of devices? Believe me, without automating this part, I mean, there's a struggle in terms of between cybersecurity and healthcare teams to kind of come to a thing. And once you do this, you define visibility, to assess the current risk level, you've defined what should be the policy which is going. Then the last two steps, the most critical ones are, you should start monitoring for all kind of known threats, which are very, very specific to these set of devices, and also the unknown threats, right? Using some kind of sandboxing and stuff. So this, we believe, is this whole 5-step workflow cycle, which is immensely useful for any healthcare provider which is starting this journey.
I'd like to dwell on a couple of things that you just touched upon. And this is right, when we're talking about healthcare, especially during the pandemic, right? It's the digital route for things, in the sense that everybody's doing digital healthcare and telemedicine. What are some of the security imperatives here that organizations need to be cognizant of?
Yeah, a great segue to this question. And if you have to talk specifically about healthcare and telemedicine, I mean, let's again taking a step back. What are the things? What happened? What happened was, things are no longer confined to an hospital, as I said, right? But you are probably doing remote consultation, for example, to patient, right? This is being done using some form of digitized app, using your home network, connecting maybe to the hospital applications, and access by whom? Access not by hospital staff, but maybe consulting doctors, for example. Right. So look at the amount of pieces involved. You're not, you are an individual as a doctor using the healthcare facilities over the network, going towards the patient, right? What happened was, suddenly now your new parameter is no longer that application in that hospital, but it's the identity. It's this patient, or it's your staff, or your contractors, or visiting faculties, that becomes the new paradigm or new boundary, right? Anything which can be, which can go haywire if it happens here, straight away the impact is on the patient's health. I mean, it's a very, very dangerous situation, right? Any wrong set of advice is giving, any wrong set of happening has a straight impact, both in terms of the person's health, but also their data, right? Imagine if you've got vital statistics and all the personally identifiable information in the wrong hands. It's a huge compliance issue as well.
And it's a cascading effect, right? There are multiple pieces that start falling. Since you're right, you have regulatory problem, then there's the entire business problem that comes about, then there's the identity problem, and of course legal problems that will anyway come about. So yeah,
absolutely, and it's spreading across a very, very different set of entities across.
So this is interesting in the sense that now we're looking at these are the kind of digital imperatives and all these moving parts in the sense that we're talking about, the contractors, we're looking at different technologies coming about. This was fine until we add another complexity, which is cloud into the entire equation. And we spoke about how cloud was essentially one of the bigger trends. In fact, the first thing you told us was the move to cloud has been such a significant trend over the last 1 year, which you obviously see accelerating over the years to come. How from the Palo Alto Network's perspective, how are you securing, the cloud aspect to ensure that this seamlessly works with the existing healthcare investments out there?
Yeah, I mean, so healthcare is no different than any other industry in terms of the adoption and the whole lead towards digital transformation. Adoption of cloud has been at the forefront to drive very, very different level of experience to their consumers, right? The thing here, like any other industry, is it's not restricted to one cloud, right? People want to take advantage of that agility, the economies of scale, but it's not restricted to one cloud. People, specifically in healthcare, you may have one set of, for example, your patient management system, which is a very in-house, let's say, application that you have moved lock, stock, and barrel to one cloud. But let's assume that EHR portal or HR portal for the hospital staff may be coming as a SaaS service, from some vendor, right? So it's a very, very dynamic cloud adoption road to start with. Number one. Number two is when you move towards this cloud, whether you're lock, stock, and barrel shifting your existing apps, or you start cloud native. The cloud, the security in the cloud has a very, very different meaning. It's good in a way because in cloud, there is something called as the shared responsibility model when it comes to cybersecurity. And what I mean by that is, when you look at cybersecurity, you probably divide it into two parts. One is the security of the infrastructure on which your application is running, and then the security of that application, the data inside that, the traffic within those applications is another, right? In a cloud, the good part is the security of the infrastructure is taken care by the cloud vendor itself, right? So companies like us are working in tandem with these different cloud providers in ensuring that second part, which is securing that application, the cloud native application, ensuring that, right from the time it is codified in our parlance, the entire DevOps cycle using the CI/CD integration is secured right at the start when this whole cycle happens. What is the used or most used terms called shift left, right? So that DevOps needs to now become DevSecOps.
DevSecOps.
Right? So right at the time when the application is being designed, right at the time when you're using any kind of IDE kits and coding, the earlier you bolt security over there, the much lesser in terms of work that you need to happen once that application goes live, and the cybersecurity team comes in. So the whole shift left. So our focus as Palo Alto is to tap that, to ensure that from a customer's perspective, their set of responsibility in this shared cloud model, we've got your back, because it connects various things. It talks about which user should have access to which kind of resources on the cloud, right? Ensuring that access misconfiguration, by the way, is the number one issue in cloud, right? A wrong bucket assigned to wrong set of workload, and that rights being misused. So config management is huge. We typically have out of the box policies to correct that, including things around compliance. So not only visibility but compliance, like if you have GDPR, if you're entering European market, we can out of the box help you there. To the actual workload coming up in terms of a VM or a container, right? So vulnerability management around that. To when they start interacting over the network to the end consumers or within those applications, how do you ensure that is kind of firewalled and there is enough segmentation? To finally the identity, which is huge, right? You are whom you claim to be, and you have only access to so many things. So all the entire life cycle in the cloud is taken care of from a Palo Alto perspective.
That's interesting. But the thing is, how do you still have somebody's back when they have a lot of applications which are not necessarily cloud native or ones that are upgraded along with the times, right? In the sense that we already spoke about the huge problem that you have with, devices that are running an end of OS, end of life operating systems, those that have not been patched, those that are coming out of the box with security patches that are not yet installed, or they don't even have security patches, let alone they being installed at a later period of time. How do you go about in dealing with these situations where you have companies that are embracing transformation, which is a good thing by and large, because you want them to embrace transformation, but their approach has been very piecemeal, saying that, okay, I'll do this. It's more like adding a whole bunch of band-aids and not looking at saying that, can I put a cast in entirety to give a structured approach? Fundamental question is legacy applications and legacy systems. How do you get their back?
Great, and this is very, very specific, as you rightly pointed out, from a healthcare perspective, right? Which, as I said, still carries a lot of these legacy end of life OS. The simple answer, if you have to rather simplify, and before we get there, there's one more issue. Rather, there are three issues from a healthcare perspective. Legacy OS is one. Second issue, Ashwin, which you will appreciate, that unlike a traditional enterprise like a bank or a manufacturing, which is defined and which is usually placed in a very highly connected tier 1, tier 2 town, healthcare is all across. It could be in a tier 3, tier 4 town. Right. So that remote connectivity is also, and the kind of control that you would have on that last mile facility is a question. And if I compound that with the problem, which is again a generic problem, not restricted to healthcare, is the availability of cybersecurity skills.
Of course, that's across the board problem. So
correct, yeah. So it's a very potent mix, especially in healthcare, with legacy OS, remote lack of skills. The best way to tackle this is not by trying and solving the problem right at that last mile, but having it do it at the network layer.
Okay.
So, ensuring that all that transactions which are happening with that end devices is, you don't have to force an agent inside or do something, but ensure that you understand what that application, what that device is, whether, it's trying to connect with your legacy apps or your cloud, multi-cloud apps. You intercept that intelligently using AI and ML, and then kind of get, again, a main thing, get it integrated in that holistic cybersecurity framework, which you touched upon, right? How do we start instead of taking a piecemeal? So it could be a zero trust framework or whatever you want to name it, right? But the whole idea is it should not be treated in silos, but it should be part of that mainstream framework from security perspective.
So AI ML is making life easier for you?
Absolutely. I mean, that it's the name of the game right now.
So so that means that it's a very significant trend where there's a lot more AI and ML technology that's been implemented, all at a network layer, in the sense that you're not even attempting to try to get into the hardware level of the device, because it's one not possible from any practical standpoint. So fundamentally, this is coming in the network layer. You're scanning for data and you're understanding how you're able to go about it. But talking about data, Huzefa, this is something that has been very significant over the last 1 year. I know of a very popular, wearable company that had its data held hostage until they were asked to pay a huge amount of money. And usually we hear, within our circles, we hear about ransomware stories going around. But this is one of the first cases where at a global level, the story came about as to how everybody's watch device data, fitness device data was held for ransom until people could, until the company paid up. We don't know if the company paid up, but our suspicion is that they did, pay up. And of course, for healthcare companies, this is ripe, right? The amount of data that is available out there to be able to take away, either keep for ransom, and to be able to interpret and play around with the data. The threat is really high. How do companies get ahead of this?
Great, and I think it segues well for us in terms of what you asked previously, right, about AI and ML.
Mm-hmm.
And here is a classic case which comes to parity. For example, as I said, for healthcare perspective, you first need to have enough visibility in terms of what all your devices are and where they are, right? The first step before you even know that which ones are there and which ones are vulnerable, because that's what this ransomware attackers do. They seek out the easy target and attack, right?
Yeah.
So let's start from there. So AI ML, again, very, very patented technology that, for example, we bring to the table, the FID technology, which kind of identifies that device and also understands the data from the sensor, which is coming from an enforcement point of view, right? What is that device is, what's the IP address, what's the traffic being, so it does, again, using AI ML, analyzes those. So that's one. Second, again, from an AI ML perspective, is with the sheer amount of data coming, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? How do you know that which alert is important and which is not with this whole plethora of thing coming? Again, you need very, very high level of sophistication going in terms of machine learning model to identify what that risk is, and is it really. But I'll give you a real life example.
Okay.
There was this machine learning model, for example, which identifies that a device is sending infusion-based protocols.
Okay.
Infusion, right? And it picked up that X amount of medicine is dispensed in a given period of time. But when you expose this to machine learning, it sees that the MAC address detects the IT and the algorithm,
right,
and figures out and course corrects that this is not an infusion pump but a printer.
Okay.
Right, which is supplying the ink to the printer, right? So it's as granular as that. So I guess the takeaway is obviously you need a lot of has to be a very, very advanced ML based approach, sandboxing, zero-day protection. But the second piece I think is often ignored, Ashwin, is involved used a good incident response team.
Yeah.
Right, because when you're attacked by ransomware in such situation, it is good to follow some best practices, involve people who are professionals. We have a very, very high level of incident response team from Palo Alto. They not only take over, they understand the scope. They not only take over and understand what that impact is on that ransomware, how is it going to impact your day-to-day operation, and to an extent, they even go and manage and I would say work with that attackers to see whether you should pay the ransom, or there are enough things in place to recover and done with it. So that incident response management is a very, very critical piece here.
Fascinating. I love your story of how the system is able to identify it's a printer and not an infusion pump sending dispensing medicine. And I want to wrap up this one question, and essentially for me it sounds like a headache to imagine that here's like a medical hospital, and that's we're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of devices. Many of these devices have never received a patch. Many of them can never be patched. Many of them have firmware which are problematic, let alone the software which is acting over it. So it sounds like a problem. How can medical organizations that want to beef up their their infrastructure, their security, and their especially the internet of medical devices in that space, how can they go about it when you've got the sheer quantity of devices that need to be taken care of?
Yeah, the moment you you talk about connected devices and thousands of them, the first thing which hits you is the amount of scale,
Yeah.
right? And with any scale issue, and specifically here where it's just going to get added with this, IoT and IoMT set of things.
Yeah.
I think the number one thing which people should look at is automation. Automation to ensure that you have enough visibility, automation to ensure that you are kind of running the protection, addition of devices, inclusion, everything is run in an automated way so that there is less and less dependency on human intervention and less and less dependency on the lack of talent sort of it. And ensuring that once you're ingesting this device, you understand, you automate that piece, and then you start monitoring for alerts and threats. How do you then automate their entire security operations sector?
Yeah.
All right, which again comes under the larger cybersecurity program perspective. How do you then ensure that you have enough automated way of doing managed threat hunting for threats across these devices? So, in a nutshell, I think automation, a fully automated way of ingesting, monitoring, putting risk-based policies in place, and after you do that, monitoring that whole for any incident or any life cycle of an incident in an automated way. For which I think Palo Alto is I think that's where we hit the nail very, very hard. Is we believe that this whole scale and this whole premises of connected devices needs to be tackled in an integrated way. So let us take care of integrating the best of breed approach, whether in terms of the IoT device or type of device or traditional workloads, endpoints. Let that all come in an integrated way. Once we integrate best of breed, how do we ensure we give you enough automation to run and operate this, and finally do it in a very, very simplified way, simple to procure, simple to install, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel and make it very, very simple. So integrated, automated, and simplified is the way to go.
Fantastic. This has been a lovely, lovely conversation, Huzefa, in the sense for me to get a complete holistic picture as to how Palo Alto Networks is looking at this space, from looking at the trends and looking at the unique challenges that are there in the healthcare sector, the common challenges of having multiple disparate clouds. How do you unify that problem? How do you look at getting to the data layer? Since getting into the device layer is a complicated challenge. And also, for me, it's interesting to know how you're going to deal with the problem if the problem does arise, in terms of, if you reach a ransomware problem, in a sense, the incident response, which is something a lot of companies are hesitant to look towards because they feel that they look at it as a PR problem, whereas it's far bigger than a PR problem. The PR problem is the smallest problem, but especially in the medical sector, where so much of data is at stake, and the problem is only going to get amplified in the years to come, when considering that 2020 and 2021 has pushed that impetus towards telemedicine, and of course everybody is using connected devices to be able to do everything, let alone medical and healthcare. So thank you so much, Huzefa. It's been a delight to have you join us here with us, and more power to you and your team at Palo Alto Networks.
Thank you so much, I was a pleasure talking to you, and I think we touched upon all the right chords.
Lovely. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.